Good morning, friends. We have a special guest today. The special guest from the Egypt, the country which has a very old one of the oldest civilization. And our guest is the scholar in that civilization. So, shall we welcome Dr. Hussein Bassir, who is archaeologist, writer, scholar, and who has done many work or many the he has taken part in a many uh, projects regarding the civilization. And we have our friend Ashraf Abul Yazid, who is, because of him only we got Hussein Basir sir. And because being a scholar, being a poet, being a being a journalist, he knows a lot about the Asian and Asian literature, Asian civilization and culture. And this Egypt is his own country, so he is also very much interested. Uh, I will just before talking about the Dr. Hussein Basir, I will show you a small clip on his work, which can give you an idea about what he is doing and how he is doing, and very little idea. And then Ashraf will take the mic, and then we will listen that how this oldest civilization worked. But it is not easy to know about this much old civilization in 1 hour, but at least we can get some glimpse and important thing. And especially I will expect you to talk about the language and the literature point of it more deeply. So I will show you Dr. Hussein Basir's one small clip.
دكتور حسين عبد البصير مدير متحف الآثار في مكتبة الإسكندرية.
عالم الآثار المصري والكاتب الروائي المجدد الحسين عبد البصير. كان صغير السن عندما شغلته الآثار وأعجب بها، فكان يذهب لزيارة المتاحف الأثرية، خصوصا المتحف المصري في ميدان التحرير بالقاهرة. وكثيرا ما أثارت دهشته رؤية طلبة كليات الآثار الذين يجيدون قراءة الكتابة الهيروغليفية على التماثيل الفرعونية الموجودة في المتحف المصري. سرعان ما حقق أمله في دراسة الآثار المصرية القديمة ومعرفة كيفية قراءة نصوص الفراعنة القدماء، ودرس الديانة المصرية القديمة بجامعة أكسفورد عام 2001، ثم حصل على درجتي الماجستير والدكتوراه في الآثار المصرية القديمة وتاريخ وآثار الشرق الأدنى القديم في جامعة جونز هوبكنز بالولايات المتحدة الأمريكية عامي 2004 و2009 على التوالي. وقد استطاع دكتور الحسين عبد البصير في وقت مبكر من حياته أن يؤلف عددا كبيرا من الكتب والمقالات العلمية والروايات باللغتين العربية والإنجليزية.
So it was fantastic, beautiful, and because I think that Dr. Hussein Basir is in his museum, so the light is not very strong. We could see him in the picture. So I will go at the back and I will ask Ashraf Abul Yazid to talk to him. So welcome, Ashraf, and welcome, sir, Hussein Basir ji. We want to know a lot from you. Thank you very much to join us.
Thank you. Thank you, Ratiji, for introducing us. And thank you, Dr. Hussein, for joining Kritya and Egyptian for the first time in our talk show. And as you see in the photo, there is an ancient Egyptian, but writer. But we have the modern Egyptian writer who studied the brothers and the families of that ancient writer. First, I'd like to congratulate you on your recent publications. I think you have a novel and, of course, a historical book also. Let us begin with these two publications, saying to telling us about them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ashraf, and thank you so much for our guest. As you have said, I have written and published recently two books. The first is a book about Egyptology called Living Forever, Self-Presentation in Ancient Egypt, and this book is a multi-volume book. I mean, a multi-author volume book. I have many scholars all over the world who participated with me in writing this book. And in this book, we discuss a very important issue, how the elite members represented themselves in art and language of the period. I mean, like from the beginning of Dynasty 1 until the Dynasty 30th. I mean, during the Pharaonic era, from the beginning, around 3000 BC until Alexander the Great invasion of Egypt back in 332 BC. And the other book is a novel called The Great Ebo or Eboware. It was a very famous Egyptian scribe and sage in ancient Egypt. And this gentleman or this guy wrote a text, and this text it's a dialogue between him and the king, and he told the king in this dialogue that the situation in Egypt at that time after the old kingdom is not that great anymore. So, and he asked the king to go back to the traditions of Egyptian kingship and restore the country and put justice in place. So this was the novel, but as you know, it's not that easy concept as I explained. But the thing is, it has many characters and
Of
many
course.
themes and ideas in this book. Because as you know, the Egyptian literary work, so it was only a dialogue between the king and this scribe, and we don't know the end of it because it's lost. And did this? It's a fictional, as Naguib Mahfouz did in his novel.
Yes, and
Called-
this is my second question. Actually, I it is really connected between history and literature in modern Arabic novels. A good example is Naguib Mahfouz, who started his legendary route by writing about these ancient Egyptian stories and tales. Uh, but if you celebrate this latest, uh, give us, I mean, if it is that kind of relationship between literature and history, how difficult it is, like fictional, and you are inventing. Is it going away from history? This is the question. Is it some sort of inventing a parallel history, not the exact one?
You are right, because as you know, there are many writers. We have writers who writing for the past, and writers who are writing for the present, and writers who are writing for the future. I myself can consider myself as a writer who is writing for the present tense, for this, you can say for this current, because we like create the history, we revive the history, but the thing is, history is not the aim as we wish to create, but the thing is we have to explore the history to give an idea for the present, for the future. So as Naguib Mahfouz did in his novels back in 30s about like Ardubis or Khufu Wisdom or Thebes at War, all these magnificent works of which Naguib Mahfouz wrote are really good examples of the interaction and relation between the author and his literary works. As myself, I always do create ancient Egypt, but I can't work on something happened in ancient Egypt as Mr. Mahfouz did in his novels. I create these things, but really it can be done and written and existing in ancient Egypt, but they are not like based on like literary stories or like Seeps at Word of Naguib Mahfouz, which gives us an idea about the conflict between the Hyksos and the King Ahmos the first back in early New Kingdom. But myself, I create these things, and because I know the civilization well, I do works in ancient Egypt, but not based on actions or historical events which happened in ancient Egypt. So this is the difference between myself and my works and our great writer, Mr. Naguib Mahfouz.
Before going away a little from literary scene, there was an award in 2002. You won Princess Suad Sabah award for novel. What was this book about?
Yeah, it was called Al Ahmar Al Aguz in Arabic, or the Old Red Hippopotamus or Red Hippo. It was a novel I created in prehistory of Egypt. It was before the beginning of Egyptian civilization. I imagined a story and a struggle between a fisherman, an old fisherman, and an old hippo. Each one of them has a son, and each one of them killed this son. So the struggle between these two characters, and this novel, as you said, on Dr. Suad Sabah novel back in 2002, I think, or 2001, I don't remember
Yes,
exactly.
2002. Yeah.
Yeah, but I obtained it when I was before 30 age, 30 years old, because this was for young
Yes,
writers
exactly.
in the Arab
Exactly.
world. So I did this novel, and really, it's in this novel, like you can say, I'm much influenced by Ernest Hemingway's Old Man and Sea, Moby Dick by Herman Melville. So the story about between the struggle of the human will and the God will, what we are trying to do and what we can do, because the will of God is the will can which always controlling our actions or destiny, whatever you call it. So this is the main theme of this novel. At the end of the novel, somebody said, okay, the old hippo is killed, but at the end of the day they discover he is not killed, and he is always there, and this is the reality which human don't want to remember.
Yeah. Dr. Hussein, when we talk about ancient Egyptian languages, it is only hieroglyphic. But from Rosetta Stone, we know that there are two at least languages spoken, which is Domitic and hieroglyphic. What is the difference between the two languages? Are they spoken in the same fields? I mean, is it a language for public and a language for religious figures? What is the difference?
So we have the ancient Egyptian language and we have ancient Egyptian scripts. Hieroglyphic is an ancient Egyptian script. It's called the sacred writing, and this is the main figure of language which was used in ancient Egypt. Hieratic is also another script but was written by priests. Demotic, it's another script but was written by people. Because as you, like the same as in Arabic, we have the النسخ and رقعة, both are scripts, but اللغة العربية, Arabic language, is the language. So in ancient Egypt, we had the same. We had hieroglyphic, we had hieratic, demotic, and the last phase is Coptic. Coptic, almost the ancient Egyptian language, but it is written in Greek alphabet. So this is a difference in addition to some few letters from ancient Egyptian language. But the thing is, although it's written in Greek, it's different from the classical Greek language. It's totally Egyptian. The voice is Egyptian, but the form is Greek. So if you give
Yes,
this language to a guy who is specialized in Greek language, he can't do it. He can recognize some things, but he can't read it because it's
I
Egyptian
see.
grammar. It's words written in Egyptian, but the thing is only the form is Greek.
Yes. Nowadays, Arabic language is written in Arabic alphabet, but this alphabet is used by other languages. And maybe in Xinjiang, they use Uyghur alphabet in talking Chinese, but you cannot understand. This is the same. You can understand a little from Persian or Urdu because they are in alphabet,
or
but they are
Turkish.
different
Yeah,
languages.
yeah, or Turkish the same before
Yes,
now. Yeah,
before getting
before,
the
yes,
Latin alphabets. Yes.
correct. Yeah.
Uh, we are in the same track talking about languages, but I am shifting to religion. And here I recall your study, MA and PhD in Egyptology in Near East and Archaeology of Johns Hopkins University in ancient Egyptian languages, scripts, and literature. I like you to give more about the thesis of this research, post research in MA and PhD.
Yes, as you know, I was before studying at Johns Hopkins. I was studying at Oxford University in UK, and I was doing ancient Egyptian religion with Professor John Baines. At that time, I was studying a very famous goddess called the goddess Rinnotet, and Rinnotet was the goddess of harvest in ancient Egypt. And after that, I went to Johns Hopkins and I started there my PhD program. I started with the MA and then with PhD. In my PhD, I was studying self presentation of some guys or some persons from Said, Egypt. Said, Egypt was a very important Egypt around. It started around 664 BC until 526 BC, and it was ended by the Persian invasion of Egypt. During that time period, the Egyptians tried to revive their ancient culture, what we call Renaissance of Egypt at that time. So they tried to imitate the old culture, especially in the golden ages of ancient Egypt. I mean, the Old Kingdom, the time of the pyramids, the Middle Kingdom, the time of the literature, and the New Kingdom, the time of the empire. So during that time, they looked back on these golden ages and tried to imitate them. So I started to study these two characters from the end of the Said period to give an idea about the relationship between the king and his official, and also between those individuals and each other, and also to know the relationship and the position of these individuals in their society and their afterlife wishes, and how did they represent themselves in art and the literature of the period to express their identity and to have a good eternity, and also to ensure their eternity in the afterlife, and also to receive good deeds from the future generations.
Dr. Hussein, maybe more than half a century ago, uh, Andrew Robinson wrote this book published by Alexandria Bibliotheca on lost languages. Do you think Egyptian is one of those lost languages or lost languages that are not yet discovered or could be read? What is the difference between languages, lost and living?
Yeah, as you know, the Egyptian was lost until Jean-Francois Champollion deciphered the language back in 1822. So now Egyptian is like a very standard language, and we have many good scholars of the field, of the scripts, of the phases, of everything in ancient Egyptian language field, or what we call Egyptian philology. And but you can say this about Nubian language. I mean, we have Nubian language. It's not deciphered yet, but like Sumerian, Akkadian, Egyptian, Hebrew Bible, all these languages are now deciphered, and it's well written and explained, and we have many scholars. But some, like the Maya language, is not yet decipher somebody working on it. So it's some languages like of all civilization, like the Nubian, one. So those one you can call lost, but or even if they are found, they are not understood by us until now. But ancient Egyptian language was lucky enough because Jean-Francois Champollion discovered the secrets of the language back in 1822, and since then we have Egyptology as a discipline, as a scientific discipline since then.
You know, in such languages used, let us say, images. We thought that this is only because they are old, but if you refer to new languages, you can see also we are referring to images like a common language. You know, the signs on the roads, everyone can understand. Uh,
Yes.
do you think that Egyptian ancient language is so advanced that it used photos or images?
Yeah, Egyptians were very smart, ancient Egyptians, I mean, at that time, and they invented language as like pictures, as you said, and also voice. So we have sounds and we have images. Both of them, both of them can express the idea yes, you're right, which ancient Egyptian, yeah, tried to express by using this sign to give the idea. If you want like to say, I would like to eat, they put in the mouth to express the idea of somebody eating or somebody wants to eat. So this was, and also when I represent Mr. Ashraf in writing, I put a determinative at the end of the word as a seated man to express this name expressing a man. If it's a woman, I put a seated woman. If it's a god, I put a sign of a god. So this was very clever and a smart idea. And as you know, the language itself was invented to express the commodities, the merchandise which were used at that time to express this is like oil, this is honey, and keep tracking of everything going back and going out and in the storage area at that time. And so through this, we learned a lot, and then the language advanced from like very simple ideas to very complicated ideas, especially in religious texts. Sometimes we can understand what they mean by these things. So they have some easy things to read and some tough stuff you can't handle easily.
As an outsider, I have a question because I do not know much about. Means I know only which is written in Google and all. So I have a question. First question is that Egyptian language. Everyone says that it could be a very scientific language because the signs are very strong and very well created. That is sure. But another thing is that how do you find that how it was spoken? Because you are speaking very different language from those from that Egyptian language at that time. You are reading, you are speaking in Arabic language, which
Yes,
think that was not related or not from the family of Egyptian language. That's what I feel. Maybe I am wrong. I give
right.
you example. For example, in India, we have Vedic Sanskrit. Sanskrit was different afterward than Vedic Sanskrit, and the Vedic Sanskrit there it came the Sanskrit, and then many languages derived from the Sanskrit. So we, even though if I study Hindi, I can find out the pronunciation of the Sanskrit and ancient time. So that is the question, that how did you find out that what was the pronunciation of that time of that language, and how it has been used.
You are right. This is very good question. The thing is, as I said, we have Coptic, and the Coptic is the last phase of ancient Egyptian language. Through Coptic, we have learned about vowels and consonants. So in Egyptian, we have only consonant. We don't have vowels. Vowels, like if you say in English A, O,
Yeah,
U,
yeah.
E. So like if I say sijim is a verb in ancient Egypt, means to hear. So when I go to Coptic, I found it as sotim. So The verb could be in ancient Egyptian language, I mean in hieroglyphic, could be sojim. So we learned a lot from Coptic to give us the correct pronunciation of the ancient Egyptian words, because as you know, it's written in Greek uh, characters and it has vowels in it. So gives us an idea about how can we uh, pronounce these words in the correct way as the ancient Egyptian did.
So
And
do
as
you
you
think?
know, yes,
Sorry, please.
Arabic also is different. It's a Semitic language. For Egyptian, it's Afro. You can say Afro-Asiatic. It's something from like Africa and Asia, so it's not Semitic. But we have some, you can say, loan words or loan characters from Semitic language, like as in terms of feminism or feminine, we have the T as ending for S means man, Set means women. So we have this T or Ta in Arabic as the ending for feminine. We have also dual. You don't have dual in English, but we have dual in Semitic and we have dual also in Egyptian. What we call in Arabic al-muthanna means two persons. So these things came to Egyptian from Semitic language. So Egyptian has many, you can say, grammatical characters or features from Semitic language and also African languages. Go ahead, please.
Uh, that was actually I wanted to know that, and I it was interesting that you said that you have a dual also. We in Sanskrit also we had the
Good.
single, then dual, and then many. So in Sanskrit also it was. So I think it was an ancient culture, ancient civilization had some connection somewhere. Another thing I want to ask you that is there a connection? Is there some similarity between the Greek language and the Egyptian language, older Egyptian language?
During the Greek occupation of Egypt, what we call Ptolemaic or Greco-Roman Egypt, we had like the Greek language as the official language of the state at that time. So many Egyptian people turned their names into Greek names and also their religion, their culture to be beloved or accepted in the eyes of those ruling family. But we don't have that much influence or we can say interaction between Greek language and Egyptian. But during the Ptolemaic period, we have something what we call Greek hieroglyphic or Ptolemaic hieroglyphic. It's a hieroglyphic, but written in the Ptolemaic as the Greek temples in Egypt. So it has some differences from the ancient Egyptian, but it's still Egyptian. But with we call it Greek because it was written in the period. I mean, in the Ptolemaic period, but it's not like Greek in terms of philology, grammar, or so on. But we have many Egyptian with Greek names. We have also the assimilation of Greek gods and goddesses and the Egyptian gods and goddesses during that time. So it was like a time of interaction between East and the West. And this was the image and the message of Alexander the Great during that time period because he considered himself the unifier of the whole universe, as he was told by his teacher Aristotle, that to combine East and West in one identity. Before that, they were looking at the East as like a very barbarian civilization. But he himself, Alexander, got married a Persian lady, Roxana, and invaded the whole what we call ancient Near East at that time. So Alexander was one of the first heroes of having interaction between and connecting both East and West in one identity.
One more question, shall I ask Ashraf?
Yes, please. Yes.
Uh, I came to know that you have written novel and you were talking about the novel and something is spirituality and the gods and then that is related. It's very interesting. It's interesting. Did you use your this study in your novel, or you created totally imaginating because you know the lines of those that civilization, and then you created that novel. How did you make the theme of the novel?
The thing is, the first thing is the idea. How can like think about the idea, and then when I have the idea, I create the characters. So I always create ancient Egyptian environment, but I don't like depend on events, historical realities, or something, or like a king, or like a myth, or a story which happened in ancient Egypt. I create these things, but they are not against ancient Egypt. But you it could be they could be happening in ancient Egypt. But the thing is, they did not happen in ancient Egypt. As I said, we have our great writer, Mr. Naguib Mahfouz, who wrote around three novels about ancient Egypt at the beginning of his time. So he depended because he was a student of philosophy and he used to go to faculty of arts and department of ancient history and archaeology to listen to Egyptology classes at that time when he was a student at Cairo University. So he learned a lot, and so he applied what he have learned in those lectures or classes into his novel. But I myself, because I know the civilization well, I know how to create an Egyptian guy speaking, an Egyptian environment, and like an Egyptian character, know about morals, and know about actions and interaction, kings and the queens, novels. I create them, but they are not like Ramses II or Tutmosis III or Ahmos. They are something is Egyptian, but not to have be uh, happened in ancient Egypt.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Ashraf, go ahead. Thank you very much
Yes,
for
thank
giving
you,
me that.
Ratiji. And you know, our friend Rati asked you about the voices, about how to speak, how the vocal of those ancient Egyptian letters. Now I am going further. I am asking you about the music. You know, Egyptian used to have this kind of wall paintings on working and playing on instruments. Is there some time that we will find to listen to ancient Egyptian orchestra? I mean, this music, could it be found someday?
Yeah, I think so. We have many Egyptian scholars really who are working and already worked on recreating or reviving ancient Egyptian music. I remember Dr. Gaudat al-Malt. He's a very famous Egyptian guy who I think he's a professor of music at Hulwan University, and he did compose some music depending on ancient Egyptian music. We have also some other foreigner scholars who are specialized in this field, but really it's very interesting. And as you know, the Egyptian music was played all time, and especially in temples, in the royal courts, in also in parties. We have like some very famous banquet scene. You find ladies sitting, eating, and some girls playing music. And so it's as you know, ancient Egyptian lived their life to its fullest, not as we can consider them. They were like so interested about death than life. No, life was the main target and was the main aim and of their life or existing on earth. But the things they were preparing themselves for the other life, or the second life, or the eternal life after death. This was the main goal. So, like resurrection and life after death was the main figure and the main forcing power which made the civilization of ancient Egypt. So, we find these scenes and all these artistic forms which the ancient Egyptian created to be used again and again in their afterlife. So they did this for their eternity and everlasting forever and ever.
Yes. Uh, I will refer to your writing because you are not only connected to history, but to places as well. And this was very clear in your short stories entitled Tokyo. I'd like you to talk a little about the place in the writings of Hussein Basir.
Yes. As you said, this is a short collection of short stories. I wrote it called Love in Tokyo, and I've been to Japan and Far East several times. Japan, Singapore, South Korea, China. 2 years ago, before coronavirus, and really, I learned a lot from this Far East civilization and culture. And as you know, India and China and all these great culture are great civilization as the Egyptian civilization, and are are among the best civilization all over the world. So when I was there, and I was going to a garden each day. I spent 1 month in Japan, and also I've been to Japan also to another place called Kanazawa in the north. I was a keynote speaker about museums in the 21st century. So I like the place Kanazawa, and Kanazawa at that time was like snowing all time. So when I was there, I did write a story about Thulug Kanazawa, or snows of Kanazawa, like Thulug like Ernest Hemingway, very famous story, Silug Kilimanjaro, or Kilimanjaro Snows, or Snows of Kilimanjaro. And also about Love in Tokyo, it's about relationship between a guy from from Egypt who studied Egyptology, and a Japanese lady who met together, and there was a love story between them after a separation of years. After they studied in England, UK, they they met each other, and they decided to stay together. I was there by the imperial palace of the Japanese emperor, and I like the atmosphere there, and I got the idea from there. And also, I wrote some short stories in this collection about Baltimore. Baltimore is a very famous city in America. When I was studying there at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, so I wrote about love in Baltimore and Eid al-Hub of Baltimore. I mean,
The Love
Valentine's
Festival.
Day. Valentine's Day in Baltimore, and Baltimore by night, and other places. So, and I wrote also in this collection about ancient Egyptian king Djoser, the builder of the second, the step pyramid at Saqqara, and his genius architect, Mr. Imhotep, and all this. And I wrote also about the life of ancient Egypt during prehistory. So in this collection, you find myself writing about places, about people, culture, and interaction between the place and man during these different times, even if these places are in the Far East or America, or in ancient Egypt itself.
You know that we have a very
Yes.
popular
Ratiji.
Bollywood film. Very popular Bollywood film. Name is Love in Tokyo. That is why I came here. It was a very popular
That's good.
film of our time, our young age, and its name was Love in Tokyo. So that is why I was
Good. I
smiling
have
and I
to see.
came
I
here.
have to watch it.
Yeah,
I have to watch
Bollywood
it.
film.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. Yes, you are
So now,
very important in cinema. We learned a lot from Indian cinema, like we know Amitabh Bachchan and other many people who like shaped our childhood and youth years.
yeah, yeah. And so now, Ashraf, please go ahead. Uh,
Ratiji, would you please play us this second short clip about Mr. Dr. Hussein?
À Gizeh, des travaux de restauration ont également lieu, mais sur les tombeaux qui jouxtent la Grande Pyramide.
On vient de placer ce nouveau bloc de pierre ici pour rebâtir cet ancien mur. Il doit être aussi grand et semblable que l'original.
Le docteur Hussein Bassir supervise les pyramides de Gizeh et ses anciens sites.
Comme vous le savez, les pyramides d'Égypte sont célèbres dans le monde entier. Alors c'est une lourde responsabilité de diriger ce merveilleux site que toute la Terre veut visiter. La Grande Pyramide de Gizeh est un monument majeur pour l'Égypte et la civilisation égyptienne. Comme vous le savez, cette pyramide a subi de nombreux outrages. Mais, comme le dit un célèbre proverbe, l'homme craint le temps, mais le temps craint les pyramides.
Dr. Hussein, you know, for almost a decade, you had your archaeological field work, and this is a hint of your work there in many different places and locations and the sites, historical sites in Egypt. I'd like you to give us some highlights of this era.
Yes, when I started my career as an archaeologist and Egyptologist at the SCCA or Supreme Council of Antiquities back in 90s, I started working at Giza Pyramids and I traveled to many other places like Bahariya Oasis in the western desert of Egypt and also Heliopolis and Nabta Playa in the western desert. We did so many good excavations with Dr. Zahi Hawass in the Valley of the Golden Mummies and also at Saqqara. We recently announced a very famous discovery by the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. We discovered there, I mean, the ministry, they discovered around 59 coffins from late period Egypt. So it's like a great discovery. So during our excavation work, we always love to dig, searching for the history of history of Egyptian man and civilization. So this is the main task that we usually do. When you discovered some new monument, as you receive a newborn, a child. So this is the feeling which I usually get when I work in excavation. So this is the practical aspect of our profession or our job as archaeologists. So to dig and search for history, for excavation, and to complete the gaps in ancient Egyptian history or archaeological material that we lack some information about it. So digging and excavation, working on archaeological sites, really it's an amazing job, and this is the best thing about our field ever.
Uh, you know, Dr. Hussein, I'd like to introduce some famous photos of ancient Egyptian civilization. And here is a collection. So I'd like you to give a comment on each of these photos. This
Sure.
is first.
Yes. So this is a very famous scribe, Egyptian scribe or writer from ancient Egypt, from the Old Kingdom. And this statue is very famous and unique. And this statue, we have it in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. And as you know, he is like sitting in the very famous scribe pose or position. And some of them could be reader and some of them could be writer, depending on if he's like looking to somebody. That means he is like receiving the words which somebody telling him to write down on the papyrus sheet in front of him. Or some of them like looking down, that means he's reading by himself. Or if they are like just holding the papyrus, that means they are reader, not writer. Oh, this is King Khafra, very famous king, or Kefren, the builder of the second pyramid of Giza. And as you know, we have three pyramids at Giza, one for Khufu or Cheops, one for Khafra or Kefren, and one for Mykerinos or Mycerinos. And this is Minkaure, the third one. So this is one of the most important statues all over the world. Oh yeah. Oh, this is from Tanis, golden treasures which Pierre Montier discovered at San el Hagar or Tanis in Eastern Delta. One of the wonderful material which he has discovered. But the thing is, during that time, the Second War broke out, so the discovery did not receive the much attention which King Tutankhamun discovery received. Oh wow, this is a jackal from the collection of Tutankhamun, very famous, and this is god Anubis, and he was a god of mummification in ancient Egypt. And so because he used to eat the mummies. So the ancient Egyptian worshipped him to avoid his weak, wicked actions. Oh, this is a black statue. This is very famous black statue, and as you know, black statue is like if you go to Egypt nowadays during Friday prayer, you do see people like sitting and putting their hands on their knees like this. So this one of the statues which used to be replaced in Egyptian temples. Oh, the golden mask of King Tutankhamun, one of the most precious pieces all over the world, as you know, discovered by Carter back in 1922, November 4th.
This is a site of, you know.
Oh yeah, this is one of the maquettes that we have. It's about military troop from from ancient Egypt, and they are displayed at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. This is Akhenaton, the very famous, the philosopher king, father of Tutankhamun, husband of Nefertiti, and the son of Hippopotamus III, and son of Queen T, one of a very dramatic character who changed the whole belief in ancient Egypt. One of the couples of validity, very, as you know, women in ancient Egypt received so much respect and attention, and they were partner and equal to men. They were not normal. They were very important in ancient Egypt.
Like what these two statues say.
Yeah, this is a very famous statue of Nefret and Rahotep. Both are coming from Dynasty 4, the dynasty of King Khufu, and they were discovered in Maydum in Bani Suef in uh, Middle Egypt. One of the most beautiful pieces that we have from that time period, and they are displayed at Cairo Museum now.
Yeah, Dr. Hussein, يعني, these are photos, but these photos and characters have gone to cinema. How far cinema introduced those characters well, in the right place, correctly, in the theme of history? How do you see cinema and ancient Egyptian civilization?
This is a very good question, Mr. Ashraf, to be honest with you. And as you know, in Hollywood, they always like try to give a bad image of ancient Egypt. Like we have Imhotep, a very famous character and scribe in ancient Egypt, who was a very sacred and a holy guy, and they displayed him in a very bad way in movies in Hollywood, and also have Indiana Jones. This is very famous here by Harrison
Yeah.
Ford and other things. So and like Night at the Museum would be one of the good movies which Ben Stiller did, and they give those.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Rami Malek is an Egyptian guy. He's a character of the Egyptian king at that in this movie. So this is one of the, you can say, good movies about like showing or like representing ancient Egypt in cinema. But in Egypt we have good attempts to present ancient Egypt, like Shadi Abdel Salam, The Mummy is a good movie, and we have some other like Yusuf Francis, The Search of Tutankhamun, and we have also some documentary movies by Shadi Abdel Salam, by Ahmed Fuad Darwish, and I myself recently finished a movie about Zoser, the pyramid of the Step Pyramid, and his genius architect Imhotep, and this a documentary one. In this movie, we try to explain the relationship between the king and his high officials. Through the relationship between the king and his high official, you can create a great state. So if you wish to do something, you are great, but you have to be great depending on the great ones you are working, or depending on them to create and achieve your dreams or ambitions.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Hussein. You have translated many of those studies into Arabic about ancient Egyptian. Uh, many titles are there, but still I want you to highlight the things you have chosen to introduce to Arabic language?
I myself consider what we can call the material culture, the great monuments of ancient Egypt are good. But the thing is, if you go deeply, if you think about the core of Egyptian civilization, I think the moral ethics, the moral values, the literature, all these things are the best thing about ancient Egypt. Because of these things, nothing can be achieved. So through the concept of like moral ethics, of priests, of religion, all these ideas are the main forcing power behind creating this great civilization. The Great Pyramid is great, is okay. Tutankhamun collection is great, is okay. But the thing is, we have to think about the artist, about the creator who did these wonderful monuments, and what was the belief or the concept behind creating these things. So if you look about the moral aspect of Egyptian civilization, the intellectual who created, who put these ideas in the minds of the architect or the sculptor or the painter, this is the main thing that we should think about it carefully and extensively in thinking or in studying ancient Egyptian civilization. The Great Pyramid, as I said, is a great project, but the thing is about how this project was created, how many workmen worked in it, how did they like, how did they arrange this work for several years and for several thousands of workmen to work on in this project without having a day of stopping at all. So this
Yeah.
was the main thing about this. So we think about these aspects as best things about Egyptian civilization, but we have to think behind creating these things because these things are in front. We have to look in the back to see the real creator of
Into deep,
civilization.
yeah. You are right. You are right. You know, Dr. Hussein, referring to you, what you are saying now, there is a huge anthology. As you see, this is the literature of ancient Egypt. This is a great collection of stories, instructions, steles, autobiographies, and poetry. You
Yes.
know, I can read. This is an AUC book. Uh,
Yusuf, yeah.
in one of Ramses II, let us say, motive steels placed in shovels associated with the Nile, that he is talking to Amun, giving praise to Amun. I make him adoration in his name. I give him praises to the highlight, to the height of the sky, to the breadth of the earth. I declare the greatness of his power to the end of the poem. Actually, this kind, you know, Dr. Rati is writing poetry. You are writing short stories, novels. I'm writing some sort of literature. We are in the field, so we aren't very interested in the literature of the ancient Egyptians. And these were translated into English. Is there some sort of similar to be translated into Arabic? Some sort
Yeah.
of this huge anthology.
Yeah, this is very good, and this is really done by William Kelly Simpson and the other back in 2003. It's a good book, and this is the
Yeah,
third edition of the book. The book first published back in 1971 and then 1972. But this is, you can say, this is the expanded edition, which published by the EC Press in Cairo, New York, back in 2003. And really, I used this book when I was studying Hopkins on my first year when it was published. It's a very
it is. It is
unique and
everywhere.
yes, yes. And you're right. Really, we did some translation of Egyptian literature to English. To English, yes, but we didn't do it to Arabic. So I love to do some of these into Arabic directly from the ancient Egyptian language to give our you can say audience, Egyptian audience or Arabic audience, an idea about the greatness which ancient Egyptian literature has. And also Selim Hassan, Dr. Selim Hassan, did this. He
Yes,
translated the volume of Erman back in 1950, 1945, I believe, in two-volume set, and Mr. Gamal Ghatani published it, and also Library of Al Usra or the Family in Cairo did the same thing, and people still using them, but really they are good, but they are old. And as you know, some other stories happened, and also some other interpretation came into existence. So we have to like update our Arabic or
exactly.
Egyptian audience with the new in the field, and there are we have many good translation like by Richard Parkinson. He's a professor of Egyptology at Oxford University. Kelly Simpson at Yale, the books that you have now, and some other books. So really, we have to do this because really it's something unique, amazing when you see the ancient Egyptian back in their old times, and they created some things that we really realized in Arabic in modern literature nowadays. So they were very genius in doing like a story within the story, and this love poetry and all these wonderful things. Really, when you look at them, you find them very advanced and very unique, and they
Yeah,
are modern in their
evocative. Yes.
ideas and concept. And representing themselves in the language and literature of the period. So something you feel astonished when you read this old stuff, but it's still new and unique, although like thousands of years passed since then.
Yeah. Ratiji, I'd
Actually,
like you
uh,
to ask
uh,
some
uh, uh,
question.
yeah, it is a funny question, maybe not very much related to your work. Just curiosity that do you still follow some rituals or some social or some philosophical ideas of ancient this Egyptian civilization in your contemporary life? I
And
give
as
you
you know,
example. Uh-huh.
yeah,
I give you example that in India, from north to south, though everyone is following some hymns from Rig Veda, some they are using somewhere, and maybe the ways are different. So the philosophy, the rituals, and many things are used still in a different form in contemporary India. Is it the same thing in Egypt?
I think is there are many aspects of Egyptian civilization are being performed by Egyptian every day, especially in their language. We have many words from ancient Egypt. We have also some other stuff in terms of beliefs and also what we call popular religion. And like if you do see in Egypt, some people going to the small sheikhs. In countryside to express their gratitude to them because, as you know, they use them as a way to get them connected to the God. Because, as you know, it's not easy to be.
Blessing is.
Yeah, so in ancient Egypt, we used to have like the national deity, the national god, but we have like local gods or goddesses in countryside, and people used to like offering to them, asking them miracles. So nowadays in Egypt also to find you do find the same thing when people going to like small shrines of sheikhs or like saints if they are Christian to like give their attitude gratitude to them to express their loyalty and ask them because these are closer to them than to but although this is not acceptable in our religion in Islam, but as you know this is something from popular religion and is still existing, and some people a woman wants to get pregnant, she goes to some other places and perform some stuff. This also came from ancient Egypt. Or you go to the like a church or a mosque and they light a candle to show your gratitude to the God or to Allah. This is also happening in the same culture nowadays in Egypt.
No, actually, I asked because in Kerala, uh, a, a quite good number of Islam is there and quite good number of Christianity is there. But you know that you will not find out the difference now these days because of other political things. But 10, 15, 20 years back, you could not find out the difference between the people, except, like, for example, except they used to, at the time of marriage, their dressing sense was almost same. There are some rituals like putting the necklace on the neck was almost same in three religion, and but of course they were using their own hymns or their own chanting and or rituals. Same thing I saw that in a temples, mosque, and churches. The way of worship was little bit uh, same, and they were a good exchange between three of religion. So even though they are following three sects, their own gods, but the culture issues were very common at least 20 years, 10 to 20 years back in Kerala. Now, gradually, because of some political reason around the world, you know that why the things are getting separated and they are under the in a boxes. But that was the very interesting thing that most of the time we don't forget our very, because it is imprint in our souls, so we don't forget our very very ancient civilization or rituals or culture, and whatever religion you follow, it those culture, those rituals came means in any form to your own what you say that own way of life. So that is
Daily
why
life.
I
Yes.
ask. So I think that in Egypt also the same thing is question. I think somebody has asked a big question to you, that she asked one question that what was the name of the script, and now she has asked that I want to just remind that in 2000th century your excursion of the great Indus Valley civilization and Harappa, this might interest her. No, this is I think Tripti, after the Harappa civilization, there are many civilization which were actually before Mehergarh civilization, and now in South India, which are more ancient than this Indus Valley civilization. So this is a old story. The thing has gone further in India. Actually, she is asking question about our Indus Valley civilization. I know that you may know about it, but after Indus Valley civilization, we had exploration of many other civilization like Mehergarh civilization, and then other civilizations in south of India, which are more ancient than Indus Valley civilization. So that story is again in a history. This was the question. So I'm very much interested, and it was actually a very short time. Do we have something more
Yes.
to ask, Ashraf?
No, actually, the hour went fast because, we are digging in the ancient history of
Yeah,
Egypt, which
yeah,
is too deep.
yeah.
So, for this hour, we would like to thank Dr. Hussein Basir for joining us. It was very fruitful and interesting as well. And I am personally happy to see him again live, wishing to meet him. And for one of your audience, she asked about the photos. I will email them to Kritya to publicize them. And thank you, Dr. Hussein.
Thank you so much for having me, and really have a
Uh,
wonderful day
so
ahead.
this is not the end, Dr. Hussein Basir,
No,
because
this is a start.
many
Sure,
questions, many
sure.
because just
Anytime.
now
I believe in it.
because I'm also very much interested in civilizations, history, and all that. I also work on this direction, not like you, but I'm digging the books in place of the digging of
Yeah.
these places. So and I fortunately learned the language, the script and language of ancient Indian civilization. That is Vedic Sanskrit, like Rig Vedic Sanskrit, Atharvedic Sanskrit. My subject was also Atharveda. So this subject is what you are talking is very interesting for me, and this is not the end. But thank you very much. You took so
Thank
much
you.
time.
Thank you.
So thanks a lot.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Thank you.
Oh,
so
thank
salam.
you. Salam.
Salam.
And
Thank you.
Ashraf, Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You have done very beautiful thing that you showed the photos. That
You
was
know,
fantastic. That
Dr. Hussein is in the high level of administrative, so we wanted, to make live show for him.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Okay, thanks
Bye
a lot.
bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank-
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Bye bye.